The Priest's Soul by Lady Wilde. In former days there were great schools in Ireland where every sort of learning was taught to the people, and even the poorest had more knowledge at that time than any gentleman had now. But as to the priests, their learning was above all, so that the fame of Ireland went over the whole world, and many kings from foreign lands used to send their sons all the way to Ireland to be brought up in the Irish schools. But now, at this time, there was a little boy learning at one of them, who was a wonder to everyone for his cleverness. His parents were only laboring people, and of course very poor. But young as he was, and as poor as he was, no king's nor lord's son could come up to him in learning. Even the masters were put to shame, for when they were trying to teach him, he would tell them something they had never heard before, and show them their ignorance. One of the great triumphs was his argument. He would go on till he proved to you that black was white, and then when you gave in, for no one could beat him in talk, he would turn around and show you that white was black, or may that there was no color in the world at all. When he grew up, his poor father and mother were so proud of him that they resolved to make him a priest, which they did at last, though they nearly starved themselves to get the money. Well, such another learned man was not in Ireland, and he was as great an argument as ever, so that no one could stand before him. Even the bishops tried to talk to him, but he showed them at once they knew nothing at all. Now there were no schoolmasters in those times, but it was the priest that taught the people. And as this man was the cleverest in Ireland, for all foreign kings sent their sons to him as long as they had house room to give them, so he grew very proud and began to forget how low he had been, and worst of all, even to forget God, who had made him what he was. The pride of the arguing had got hold of him, so that from one thing to another he went to prove that there was no purgatory, and then no hell, and then no heaven, and then no God, and at last that men had no souls, but were no more than a dog or a cow, and when he died there was that end of them. Whoever saw a soul, he would say, if you can show me one, I will believe. No one could make any answer to this, and at last they all came to believe that there was no other world. Every one might do as they liked in this. The priest settled, for example, for he took a beautiful young girl to wife. But was no priest or bishop in the whole land who could be got to marry them. He was obliged to read the service over himself. It was a great scandal, yet no one dared to say a word, for all the king's sons were on his side, and would have slaughtered anyone who tried to prevent the wicked goings-on. Poor boys, they all believed in him, and thought every word he said was the truth. In this way notions began to spread about, and the whole world was going to be bad, when one night an angel came down from heaven and told the priest he had but 24 hours to live. He began to tremble and asked for a little more time. But the angel was stiff and told him that he could not. What do you want me time for, you sinner? He asked. Oh, sir, have pity on my poor soul, urged the priest. Oh ho, then you have a soul then, said the angel. Pray, how did you find that out? It has been fluttering in me ever since you appeared, answered the priest. What a fool I was to not think of it before. A fool indeed, said the angel. What good was all your learning when it could not tell you that you had a soul? Ah, my lord, said the priest, if I am to die, tell me how soon I may be in heaven. Never, replied the angel. You denied there was a heaven. Then, my lord, may I go to purgatory? You denied purgatory also. You must go straight to hell, said the angel. But, my lord, I denied hell also, answered the priest. You can't send me there either. The angel was a little puzzled. Well, he said, I'll tell you what I can do for you. You may either live now on earth for 100 years, enjoying every pleasure, and then be cast into hell forever, or you may die in 24 hours in the most horrendous torments and pass through purgatory, there to remain until the day of judgment. If only you can find some one person that believes, and through his belief mercy will be duchess fed to you, and your soul will be saved. The priest did not take 5 minutes to make up his mind. I will have the death in 24 hours, he said, so that my soul may be saved at last. On this, the angel gave him the directions as to what he was to do, and left him. Then immediately the priest entered a large room where all the scholars and kings' sons were seated, and calling out to them, Now tell me the truth, and let none fear to contradict me. Tell me, what is your belief? Have you men's souls? Master, they answered, once we believed that men had souls, but thanks to your teaching, we no longer believe so. There is no hell, no heaven, and no God. This is our belief. For it is thus you taught us. Then the priest grew pale with fear and cried, Listen, I have taught you a lie. There is a God, and man has an immortal soul. I believe now all I denied before. But the shouts of laughter that rose drowned the priest's very voice, for they thought he was only trying them for their argument. Prove it, master, they cried. Prove it. Who has ever seen God, and who has ever seen the soul? The room was stirred with the laughter. The priest stood up to answer them, but no word could he utter. All his eloquence, all his powers of argument had gone from him, and he could do nothing but writhe his hands and cry out, There is a God! There is a God! Lord, have mercy on my soul! And they all began to mock him and repeat his own words that he had taught them. Show us to him! Show us your God! And he fled to the groaning with agony, for he saw that none believed, and how then could his soul be saved? But he thought next of his wife. She will believe, he said to himself. Women never give up on God. And he went to her, but she told him that she believed only what he taught her, and that a good wife should believe her husband first, then before and above all things in heaven and earth. Then despair came on him, and he rushed from the house and began to ask everyone he met if they believed. But the same answer came from one and all, We believe only what you have taught us. For all his doctrines had spread far and wide through the country. Then he grew half mad with fear, for the hours were passing, and he flung himself down on the ground in a lonesome spot, and wept and groaned in terror, for the time was coming fast when he must die. Just then a little child came by. God save you kindly, said the child to him. The priest stared up. Child, do you believe in God? He asked. I have come from a far country where we learn about him, said the child. Will you honor direct me to the best school that they have said is in these parts? The best school and the best teacher is close by, said the priest, and he named himself. Oh no, not that man, answered the child, for I am told he denies God and heaven and hell, and even that man has a soul, because we can't see it, but I would soon put him down. The priest looked at him earnestly. How? He inquired. Why, said the child, I would ask him if he believed. He had to show me his life. But he could not do that, my child, he said. Life cannot be seen. We have it, but it is invisible. Then if we have life, though we cannot see it, "It may also have a soul, though it is invisible," answered the child. When the priest heard him speak these words, he fell down on his knees before him, weeping for joy, for now he knew his soul was safe. He had met at least one that believed, and he told the child his whole story, all his wickedness, his pride and blasphemy against the great God, and how the angel had come to him and told him the only way in which he could be saved, through the faith and prayers of someone that believed. "Now then," he said to the child, "take this penknife and strike it against my breast, and go on stabbing my flesh until you see the paleness of skin and death on my face. Then watch, for a living thing will soar up from my body else I die, and you will then know that my soul has ascended to the presence of God. And when you see the thing, make haste and run into my school and call on my scholars to come and see that the soul of their master has left the body, and that all he taught to them was a lie. For there is a God who punishes sin, and a heaven and a hell, and that man has an immortal soul destined for eternal happiness or misery." "Well, pray," said the child, "to have courage to do this work." And he kneeled down and prayed, and when he rose up to take the penknife and stuck it into the priest's heart, and struck it again and again until all the flesh was lacerated, but still the priest lived through. The agony was horrible, for he could not die until the 24 hours had expired. At last the agony seemed to cease, and the stillness of death settled in his face. Then the child, who was watching, saw a beautiful living creature, with 4 snow-white wings, mount from the dead man's body to the air and go fluttering around his head. So he ran to bring the scholars, and when they saw it, they all knew that it was the soul of their master, and they watched with wonder and awe as it passed from sight to the clouds. And this is the first butterfly that was ever seen in Ireland. And now all men know that the butterflies are the souls of the dead waiting for the moment when they may enter purgatory, and so pass through torture to purification and peace. But the school of Ireland were quite deserted after that time, for people said, "What is the use of going so far to learn where the wisest in all the Ireland did not know if he had a soul until he was near losing it, and was only saved, alas, through the simple belief of a little child?"